In honor of Letterer Appreciation Day this year, I am reviewing The Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering by letterer extraordinaire Nate Piekos. This book is a couple years old now. It was originally published by Image Comics, and I think the original price was a mere $16.95, which is a really great deal. If you are a comic book creator, if you are doing your own comic books and want to learn how to properly letter them, you should, absolutely. And this book gives you both halves of what you need. It gives you both the technical know-how of using Adobe Illustrator to get the job done, as well as the sort of behind the scenes, the thought, the theory, the graphic design, the customs and traditions of comic book lettering in particular that you might not necessarily get from other types of subject matter books. Yes, there's a large function of graphic design involved with comic book lettering, but there's also stuff that is almost uniquely central to, filling in word balloons and laying out pages with the balloons flowing in a certain direction and all that kind of stuff. This book covers both halves pretty nicely, and it does it, and it builds up along the way. Here, let me just show you the table of contents up front. So the main section that I got from it to begin with is dialogue, text, and make sure you're stacking things right, you're using the right typefaces, you got the right color black, that kind of stuff. Word balloons, the different kinds of word balloons you can have, the different kinds of corners, different kinds of tails, all that kind of stuff. It gives you plenty of examples of all of them. Caption boxes are in there as well, sound effects, the titles, logos, and more. This, is not necessarily comic book specific. You can learn a lot from regular graphic design, I think, in order to make a strong title and logo and that kind of stuff. But there are still some things that are very comic booky that you might want to consider along the way. And along either side of that core material, you have some personal stuff from Nate himself about the life of a letterer, his typical workday, the tools of the trade that he uses, everything from his computer to his sit-stand desk and all that kind of stuff. He also goes into the value of lettering templates, which is very important if you plan on lettering a lot, to be able to pull out those styles and those examples you want to use in your comic book lettering as you go. There's a lot of, not necessarily automation in the process of being a good comic book letterer, but there is a lot of good theory that you can employ. There's a lot of good techniques, and lettering templates is one of them, to be able to have all the shapes, the basic shapes to start with, on the side of the comic book page you're lettering, just pull them in and line them up. It's really going to save you a whole lot of time, and there's a lot of time saving you're going to want to do if you're doing comic book lettering. And at the other end of the book, on the far end, after you've lettered everything, he gets into proofs, post-production kind of stuff, how to send an invoice, all those kinds of things. So that is how the book is. It runs, I think, about 250 pages. Yeah, about 256 pages there. It gives you all the beginnings, and like I said, you saw all here's the keyboard shortcut. This is all Mac specific. If you're a Windows user, just replace Command with Control and you're good to go. You can see all the shortcuts here you're going to want to learn as you go along. You'll learn them pretty fast just from repetition. That's one of the strengths of this book also, is that if you're working along with it as you go, you'll see the same tools being used over and over again, with just sort of extra bounce being put on the end to give them a unique status, to make them look different from everything else. Just for the record, I'm a big fan of the stroke method, not the layer method. I still don't understand the layer method after all this time. I've watched plenty of people explain it to me, and so people absolutely stand by it and love it. I just use the stroke method, but I'm not doing comic book lettering professionally. In fact, I was thinking as I was reading this book, I learned how to do comic book lettering like 20 years ago, a lot on the digital webbing message boards back in the day. There was a good comic book lettering message board there, and we were doing sample pages and all that kind of stuff using Adobe Illustrator at the time. And reading this book now, there are a lot more tools available to you in Illustrator now than what we had back then, including a tool that flows lettering into a given shape. So it's practically cheating. In fact, here it is, digital lettering using area type, where you can draw out a shape and it'll put the words in that shape for you in a way that I would bet 90% of the time works out great. I've tried hand lettering on Bristol board. I've used an Ames guide. You know, as much as I lament the loss of hand lettering, I think computer lettering is probably a far better solution to the problem. I admit it. It took me about 25 years to come to that conclusion, but here I am. I've finally given in. Comic book lettering for the win. But there are a lot of tools. It comes about especially when you get to certain specific tools, like burst balloons and that kind of thing. There's like a pucker option in Adobe Illustrator now that'll help you create those burst balloons. A lot of newer tools. I haven't used Illustrator in a long time, to be honest. I'm much more a fan of the Affinity line of tools. Affinity has one called Design, I think it's called, which is basically their version of Illustrator. I'm kind of curious to see. Part of me wants to go through this book and see how much of it you can directly replicate using Affinity Affinity Design or Designer, whichever it is. I don't have that kind of time, but it would be a fun series of videos to do. I just don't know if anyone would care to read them. Here's all the balloons. So like I said, it gives you the theory behind it, like how much negative space to include, how to join the balloons, how to use the connectors, when to use them. But then it also tells you, using the tools of Illustrator, just how to do all that. So it's super handy. It's super powerful and useful. It's the stuff that you'd use in your day-to-day if you're doing anything from a comic book to just a normal, webcomic on a social media of some sort. If you're listening to the Comic Lab podcast, you've heard all these things before, but lettering is super important. You should definitely take a look at it and pay attention to it. And this book, for less than $20, it's an amazing value. I mean, you couldn't buy an online video course that would cover this kind of material for anything less than like $99, if such a thing existed. And as far as I know, it does not. But this is just an amazing book to read through, to learn about, some of the whys and wherefores again, and some of the technical practices. You'd probably be bored if you were reading it just for the whys and wherefores, but I'm a geek that way, and I like both halves. The only thing it doesn't cover, and he does mention this on a page somewhere, I forget where, lettering for sound effects, by the way, always a creative marvel. You can do lots of great stuff to really give it personality and bounce. You should learn how to change all the letter shapes and bunch them together and knock out the in-betweens and do the special effects. All that stuff is great. I always have the worst time doing it. I need more practice on it. But the one thing that is not covered in this book is actual font design. So if you want to learn how to design a font, this is not the book for you. It is a big enough topic that it could have its own book. And it's very technical, and from what I've understood from talking to people who've done it, a very tedious process. So it's not in this book. I don't think there is any book that covers it. And most of the times when people talk about it online, they're using some really awful, cheap, free web tool where you draw some letters on a page and give it to the tool, and it'll come back with a downloadable font face, which never works. It looks awful. There's so much nitty-gritty work that has to go on to make a font useful and look good, that all those tools, they don't work. To get things done correctly, it takes a professional hand, or at least a hand with a lot of time to spare, especially when it comes time to matching up all the letters to make sure they all space out individually perfectly or in pairs. A good font maker like Piekos here with Blambot, or like Richard Starkings and Comicraft, they will go through all that and deal with it so you don't have to. So just buy a font from them. It'll be easier. The Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering. If you don't own it yet and you're a fan of Letterers Appreciation Day, Lettering Appreciation Day, whatever the exact title of it is, it's a book worth getting. And I humbly suggest give it a shot, because you'll learn something. Even if you aren't directly lettering something yourself, or even if you don't want either the technical half or the explanatory half, you will learn something. And it's a wonderful book for covering all the material that it covers. It is complete. I think you could definitely turn around and letter a comic book tomorrow based on just what you learned from this book. Thanks for watching. I'm Augie DeBleek. Find more stuff at pipelinecomics.com, including a blog post that goes over some of this stuff, as well as links to past articles I've written about the world of lettering, including 3 earlier videos about the glories of Tom Warzikowski on Uncanny X-Men. Definitely worth a watch there. I'll probably put a link up to it on this side of the screen over here. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again real soon.